This is the Bruchim podcast, the only podcast in the world dedicated to Jews who think differently about circumcision. Welcome back to the Bruchim podcast. I'm your host, Eli and Matt, and joining me today from Los Angeles, California is Matthew Jones. Matthew, welcome to the Bruchim podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Matt, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself to our audience, give a little bit of your background, and then we can dig into some of the issues that we're going to cover today.
Yeah, my name's Matthew Jones, Matthew Barron-Jones. Me and my wife combined our last names. I'm from Los Angeles, maybe back 3 generations. I guess in daily life, work with an archive. I work with music archives and preservation of music history and photographs, negative things like that. And usually when I'm in these interview type of situations, it's about music from the 60s. So this is definitely a change of pace from what I'm typically used to.
For our audience, actually, Matt is from music royalty, and I don't say that lightly.
Yeah, my grandparents founded a newspaper called Soul in the 60s. And so I kind of took over in the early, I actually more recently, like in the last 5 years, but I've been working with them for about 10, 16 years, mostly on the preservation side. I also do web development and website graphic design type stuff. I have Polish lineage, which is kind of how the Jewishness enters into my family tree, for lack of a better term. And I actually was raised, I would say, Jewish adjacent. And none of my family was really that religious besides a couple of my grandparents. And when me and my now wife met, I started taking classes at American Jewish University in Los Angeles to try to get a better grasp of Jewish concepts and stuff in case we had a child and I could have answers that, I didn't want them to have to go to her all the time. That was really important to me. And I think on day one, I was partnered with someone and that was also kind of in the same boat. And on paper, everything we were saying was jiving, but we didn't agree on a lot of things. Like in terms of his relationship with Judaism, his want for religiousness within his household and different things. And so at that point, I realized that was something that was missing from kind of my experience. And so I started a journey of specific conversion and finished those classes and converted a few years ago through a conservative conversion, got married. Me and my wife are both members of IKAR, a kind of, I would say like it's non-denominationally Jewish. It's just kind of Jews from everywhere kind of come there. But I identify as maybe modern conservative, I guess.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that decision to go from kind of familiarizing yourself with some Jewish concepts to like going into a conversion program. You skipped over that pretty quickly. I'm really interested in like, what was that process like for you kind of intellectually and emotionally?
Yeah, it was a hard time. Kobe had just died in the helicopter. COVID was about to start. So there's a lot of, I feel like I skip over a lot of stuff in that time frame. I've always been interested in religion of all kinds and always was a person that asked questions and also questioned kind of normatives that were going on, specifically around religion. And I was also always looking for religion, something that I could find that shared what I felt like was my moral compass, or at least was leading me in a direction that I would like to go in. And I could never really find that. For some reason, one of the closest religions to me was something I never really even looked into in that way. I think because it was so normative to me. It wasn't something that I thought I needed to look up because it was all around me. And so when I was in those classes, the first class, and hearing what they were saying, I realized, oh, this is the thing that I have been looking for. Like, this is what this is. And that was only more confirmed throughout those classes. And so I'm a kind of like light switch type person. I'm on or I'm off. And once and it doesn't waver, it doesn't go back and forth. And a lot of times my switch is off. And once it turns on, it turns on. And in that class, the second hour of the first class, the switch went on. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And my wife was very adamant. She was, you don't need to convert to get married to me. And, I don't necessarily even, need or want you to convert to Judaism if that's not something. It's like, no, this is completely personal. And it's something that I've been kind of wrestling with for most of my life. So there was a lot of confirmation, I think, for myself in there that just kind of clicked.
And did you have any conversations with the Jewish side of your family when this sort of was going on?
Yes. Well, I mean, ironically, I'm more religious than most of the Jewish side of my family. So it kind of was, There was some pride from the older members, and there was some confusion from some of my family. I think my dad and I have had interesting conversations about. I think that we share very similar relationships with Judaism, and kind of feeling this kind of draw that is, I think, a personality trope, but also something that's, in us also, that's been kind of drawing towards Jewish culture and religion. He's not, I wouldn't call him religious by any means, but he, but when you talk to him, it's like you're just saying Jewish stuff. You just don't really know that that's what you're saying. But yeah, there was a lot of pride and a lot of like, why would you want to do that? Or what are you doing? So yeah.
And what was the actual conversion process like? Like you mentioned that there were some classes that you took, but like describe for our audience like what it was like to go through that process and how long it took and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so length of time is kind of hard because I started classes in 2019 and I ended them in 2020. And so we started in in-person classes and ended with virtual classes due to the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Yeah. COVID.
So
you were a COVID conversion.
I was a COVID conversion. And I actually, because I ended the class during COVID, I wasn't able to go into the mikvah. So I had to wait until I think 2022 in order to actually like convert. But yeah, their classes the classes are for people that are interested in Judaism that don't necessarily want to convert. They're for people they're for spouses or partners of people of Jewish people that want to know more, kind of like how I entered into it. And then there are people that are doing it for the aim of conversion or gaining information. I think it's maybe a 7 or 8 month, maybe 9 month program. It's not quite a year, but I think more than 6 months.
Oh, okay. So there's like mixed. It's like an Al-Anon for Jews kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. It's totally an Al-Anon for Jews, 100%. And there's different levels of work in their sobriety, or like moving forward. A lot of people that are just tasting. A lot of people that have been sober for 15 years and are just brushing up on the steps. But they. So and that's actually really good because you get a really kind of cool perspective. It's not just everyone's in there without any knowledge. And it's not, and then I think coming in there with no knowledge provides a space to ask questions that someone that has been Jewish most of their life or all their life or whatever, that they might take for granted or not think to ask because it's so outside the box that you don't see it. So it's a real kind of mix of understanding. But the rabbi that led that class was Rabbi Adam Greenwald. And he, at the time, was, I think, the director of the education program. And I think he did a really great job of addressing each individual kind of entrance into that experience and providing knowledge for what they needed and answers and posing questions. And they have different sections. So there's a section on language, there's a section on three types of Judaism. There's sections on Passover and holidays, and they kind of do a real speed run through kind of what it means to be Jewish.
It sounds from what you're describing like it was a largely positive experience. Were there any sort of particular challenges that you faced when you were in the program, things that didn't go so smoothly or things that were difficult for you?
Yeah, I think the Zoom part was difficult, more so because everyone was just starting to use Zoom. So we're learning to use Zoom and we're in the middle of learning about a different religion. And so there was a lot of, a couple people in their underwear not knowing it, walking past a screen, a couple, like just complete unfamiliarity with the culture of Zoom at the time. Which, I kind of miss those days looking back on them. It was a lot more fun and exciting. But, it was distracting sometimes. And there was also people there that I felt were converting, but were very touristic, voyeuristic, I guess, in their approach. There were some people that had some latent anti-Semitism, I think, that they didn't really understand or realize. And so it's a class and everyone's being respectful. So there's a lot of space for those statements to kind of be said and not enough people with enough knowledge to kind of address it. So it was all kind of put on the facilitator to kind of deal with all of that while also trying to nurture question asking. And I think that part got to be a little tricky. And I think that just depends on the people that happen to be in that class.
That's intense. It never would have occurred to me, but now that you're saying it, it makes 100% sense that this would be the place where people like just downloaded whatever was in their consciousness about Jews and Judaism. And because anti-Semitism is so prevalent, it would inevitably include some anti-Semitic concepts that were just going to like get downloaded onto everybody. And it would
Exactly.
take a very skilled kind of facilitator to manage a situation like that.
Yeah, we had a exercise where we had to draw what a Jew looked like, basically. And so there were a couple that could have been in a 20s propaganda newspaper.
Oh, no.
And
Oh,
like,
no.
with smiles on their faces, and it's just like there was no hatred or harm in what they were like saying, but it was just like, oh my, the answer is you're supposed to draw yourself or draw, it could be anybody. She looks like anybody, but it's just, it was, so there are some things like that. And so how do you kind of approach someone's good-natured attempt at answering a question you pose to them, and also allow the rest of the people in the room to validate their own discomfort with those things, and also kind of keep this person engaged and foster their want to learn and be more knowledgeable, and not kind of push that out. It's a very tricky dance that I am not capable of, but I thought Adam did a great job of dealing with that.
So at what point in the process did circumcision become like a live topic for you?
That's an interesting question, because I feel like circumcision or lack of being circumcised has been something that has been a topic in my head for a while. I don't know if my father's circumcised or not. I have no idea, but he was very adamant when I was, I think, 12 or 13 to explain to me that I wasn't, and that he didn't do it because he didn't want to inflict pain on me. And I don't know if that's something that, a moral thing that he came to at some point in his life, or it was because he wasn't and wanted me to also not be, or I don't know what that looked like. But so from a relatively early age, my dad was really open about not only sex and sexuality, but with kind of my penis, and like why I'm starting to enter gym class, and he's thinking about this, and it's like, you might look different, and here's why, and yada yada. And so it instilled at an early age a real sense of pride and confidence in me not being circumcised. And I really liked not being circumcised. I really respected my dad for making that decision. But the idea of getting circumcised was something that I never, ever thought about. When I started thinking about Judaism more seriously as something that I wanted to convert to, I started looking into things, and I talked to different rabbis about their opinions about stuff, and just kind of got like purpose from the Talmud about it, and different rabbinical ideas of why and what it means. And that was something that I was kind of wrestling with. And it also had to do with the type of conversion that I wanted, and having to find a rabbi that would do a conversion for the conversion that I wanted without being circumcised. I don't know if that's even possible, but it wasn't something that was going to be easy. And I wouldn't want to convert to like reform or something just because of this one thing. So it's something I really sat and thought about a lot and talked to a lot of people about.
So maybe we take a step back and talk about why it was important to you to convert through the conservative movement and not do it through the reform movement, because it sounds like that was very important in your process.
Yeah, I mean, it's important because it's just what I believe. Like I very much believe in a marriage between the Talmud and of contemporary understandings and of community, and I think that there's a lot of I love Talmudic interpretations by different rabbis throughout the years. I love some of Maimonides' stuff. Like, it's just, I like engaging with the source material. and I think, to me, that's a big part of my Judaism is engagement and wrestling and constantly asking and coming to understandings and being surprised by different parts that I didn't know. And so I found that through a conservative movement that comes out a lot more, while also staying very much in line with a lot of the older principles and rules that exist in the Talmud.
So yeah, I mean, you were in a bind in a way, in the sense in the sense that you were wanting to convert through a denomination that 100% would not have converted you without circumcision, would not have converted you as an intact Jew. And you were also, it sounds like you were really proud of being intact and had no sort of shame issues around it, which is also quite incredible in American society, because that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And so you're facing this kind of dilemma here. How did talk about how it felt? Talk about, like, was it a wrestling match? Was it like did it come to a point where you were just like, okay, I know this is what I have to do? How did it happen?
So the wrestling was around the interpretation of the Talmud around circumcision, what that means, and the amounts of covenants that are broken on a daily basis by people that are Jewish. And I came to the conclusion that that contract between me and God, solidified by the ritual of circumcision, was very important to me. And that was something that I felt I needed to do in order to, for myself and for my relationship with my religion, to have done and to participate in. That being said, at the same time, I don't want to go through surgery or have anyone do anything with a knife to my penis. So it was kind of really, there were multiple conversations going on in my head. Like, I understand that this is important to me, not only to me, but seemingly important to the religion or to other people participating in the religion. And one conversation I had with my rabbi was really important because he very much, I won't say that he's pro-circumcision, and I only say that because I don't know. He never made that evident to me, which I really appreciated too. What he explained was having this type of conversion I would need to have a circumcision. And he explained the multiple different ways that this can be done without having a circumcision. It would mean converting a different way, but there are all kinds of different paths to kind of sidestep this part, if just being Jewish is the thing that's important. So I was given a lot of outs during this kind of like wrestling process, but what kept overriding all those outs was the I have a puppy and he's deciding to chew on my hand, ironically, during this conversation. The idea that I wanted to that this was meaningful to me in a very specific way. And I actually did not understand how meaningful it was going to be until after I had it done. But I recognized that this was important to me, and I needed to do this for me, not to prove anything to anyone else, not to feel more comfortable or feel like I'm not a fraud or anything. It was purely me.
I want to linger on this point for just a little bit, because I think something that gets lost a lot in conversations about infant circumcision is the fact that it's done to a person at an age when they can't have any of those thoughts around it. In other words, infants are prelingual, and built into that concept is that they're not going to be aware until after the fact, that they're going to be maybe made aware of it later in life, maybe not, that like, if at all, it'll be this sort of abstract thing that they will know that had been done to them. But they never, in a way, I've always felt that kind of robs them of what you're describing right now, right? It kind of robs the person of fully engaging spiritually with the act in the way that you're describing. Does that make sense?
100%. The first conversation we had about it, my father apologized to me for not having me circumcised, and that he was sorry that I had to go through this now, and that if he had known this, he would have had me circumcised. But he was apologetic, and I stopped him and I said, I was able to consciously make a decision and go through this very spiritual process. I feel like most brises are done like, what's the plural of bris? Like, is it brii or
Britot?
Britot. Okay. The child isn't experiencing any of the spirituality of any of the God, of any of the anything beyond its connection to pain. The people around them are in some way, and there's some ritualistic things that are being done. But I was able to make a decision on my own and have this very extreme religious experience. And it changed. It did what it's supposed to do. It solidified my contract with God. Like, and not that that's what does that explicitly, but if that's the intention of the circumcision, that's what I experienced. And I would not at all be able to experience that as an 8-day-old. And so I felt like my father didn't rob me of anything. My father provided me the option to choose for myself and experience something that I am extremely proud of and has been instrumental in my experience within Judaism.
That's amazing. And can you talk a little bit about what it was like? You've been alluding a little bit to the sort of deep profundity of the experience. Give our audience a little sort of idea of, the day and the actual surgery, and then the kind of aftermath and the spiritual epiphany that you've been referencing.
Yeah, the spiritual part came like afterwards, like a little bit afterwards. But the thing itself was it was interesting because it was done at a Kaiser hospital. We found a doctor that is also a Moyle. And so he was able to do the prayers and sign. You have to get a paper sign that says that this was done in the right way. But I don't get excited before I've gotten to Disneyland. Like, I got to go through the gates. We're in the parking lot. There's a chance we're not doing it. So I don't really get scared with anticipation or whatever. It's once I'm there. So once I was there and they told me to take off my clothes and put on this gown, I was like, oh, okay, we're here. And that was a little nerve-wracking because I didn't know what was going to happen. I don't know anything about this. They explained it to me, but it's hard to explain this, especially from a doctor's point of view. It's very clinical. And the doctor was great, by the way. Like I felt extremely comfortable with me. I consulted with him beforehand. He gave me some of the same advice that my rabbi did. I had a really great network of people to talk me through a lot of this decision-making. The day of, because they don't do a lot of adult circumcision. So I was 38 when I got circumcised. Because that doesn't happen that often, it's often a time that a doctor would love to bring in other doctors to observe the operation. So it wasn't just me and a doctor and a nurse. I think there was like 5 people in there, which I wasn't expecting. But again, like you're kind of already on this bed and you've kind of already started. And so it's like, okay, this is the least of my worries. I can bring 10 more people in here. It's going to be the same thing. And it honestly almost made it a little more comical, which was nice. The doctor was talking to me about Breaking Bad the whole time and about different distraction, which I really appreciate. The most painful part during the procedure was the anesthesia. They place a needle. It could have been the size of a pin. It could have been the size of a pencil. I have no idea. All I know that it hurt and was extremely uncomfortable. On a pain scale, I would say maybe, a 5 or 4. Not unbearable by any means, but not something you want to happen. And so I think they did one at the base and then maybe a couple others more locally. It's all local. When they start doing it, you really can't feel anything. It's extremely numb. And I tried not to look. At one point I did, and it looks like it looks like a frog in like a science class. Like it's completely jarring to just kind of, this thing that I've protected my whole life is now at its most vulnerable ever. The other thing I remember is when they're kind of mending you, they're using a laser and you can smell it. And so there's definitely this flesh burn smell that's like another thing that's just like, what is going on? And the sounds are kind of like you're at a mechanic. And all of the noises and the senses that you're experiencing are way worse than the feeling of what's actually going on. And are easily avoidable and ignorable. They finished. I think it took an hour and a half, maybe. I don't remember, but maybe an hour and a half. And they sent me down to get medication. I think you're on medication for a couple weeks, pain medication. The most irritated I've ever been in my life was waiting in line to get the pain medication while I could feel the local anesthetic wearing off.
Oh.
And just kind of like, okay, let's go. And there's stitches in there, dissolvable stitches, and you're just kind of yada, yada. So as soon as I got the meds, took those and, it was fine. Extremely uncomfortable, but nothing intolerable. The recovery process was more painful than I think the actual procedure, because if you're, I think babies go through this too, but you're having unplanned erections, you're having nocturnal erections. And so you've got stitches and so it's just, it would wake me up. Or I'd have a dream that I was being tortured or something. And everyone's like, oh no, I have a boner and I'm like, and I'm awake, I'm awake. So that part, and that, I feel like that's like with any surgery, you're going to have these types of pains and discomforts. The healing process is relatively fast. I think it took maybe 2 months to be totally kind of back to normal. But yeah, that's kind of the whole of that. I don't think I left a lot out. There were times where like I was, looking at stuff. It's like, oh, I don't know. But it healed up fine. And it looks like a circumcised penis. It looks like what I hoped that it would feel up with you. Looks like you got a fresh haircut.
Yeah. I mean, so you were concerned about the cosmetic kind of appearance at a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, not to be like totally crude, but I have a lot of pride in my penis. I think from a teenage the teenage boy that still lives in my head, and so that was a concern once everything was over. I didn't think about it beforehand, but once it was done, it was like, oh, that's right, like X, Y, and Z. But it's fine.
And then you said afterwards the spiritual epiphany came. So at what point was that, like after the healing process or like before the healing was over?
Well, during the prayer before the surgery, I think that kind of started it off. It's very much like you're entering into this, like we're doing that, like this is, and so that was, I started tearing up. That was interesting, and I can't like think of anything that I've gone through that is equitable to that feeling of just like, yeah, okay, we're doing this, and like this is part of this process that I want to go through, and that's important. Afterwards, once I started really, because I'd already intellectualized and it kind of said this is why, and this is why I don't necessarily believe that it's something that should be mandated, and I do think that ultimately people should have autonomy in making this decision, but I get the importance of it, and I don't buy any of the health benefits or any of the stuff like that. That's meaningless to me. So all the intellectual stuff had already been going. And so the spiritual part started with that prayer. And then afterwards, during the healing process, you're constantly reminded that this is something you've gone through. And so it's almost like when you're fasting, or it's like you're hungry. You're just constantly thinking about, for me, like during like, or high holidays or whatever, like you're thinking about the Torah. And so I'm experiencing this pain and experiencing this recovery, like how amazing and beautiful the human body is to be able to recover from something that looked like a car wreck at one point. And just like really kind of feeling the Torah in a way that is hard to articulate. It was through some reading, but also a lot of feeling that sometimes I don't even feel when I'm at Shabbat. It was a different type of nonverbal spiritual feeling through that recovery process of healing.
I'm curious, having been through this experience, what your thoughts are about infant circumcision, and are you going to be circumcising your children, your future children? Like, what's your perspective on that? I'm curious. I'm happy to share with you how I feel about that.
Well, I've seen the documentary, so I think I got an idea. So I think a lot about kind of the purpose. And a lot of times when you talk to people about the purpose of the circumcision, of circumcising an 8-year-old boy, some people that just directly talk about it being in the Torah and that it's something that we have to do, and there's no question to it. Other people try to then layer on all these other reasons for why it's actually beneficial and why it makes sense. I said earlier, I think that we break covenants all the time. And if the child is born Jewish, the child is born Jewish. He's not becoming Jewish at 8 days old. Knowing that, and knowing that how, for me, amazing the experience of having this done later in life was, and being grateful that the choice was not taken away from me. If it was me and my wife somehow did not exist, then they would not be getting a circumcision at all. I think my wife has some other different thoughts about it, and that's something that we would need to discuss. And so, at length. And I think that's not a conversation that we've outright had yet in any way that's definitive. If it was up to me, I would choose not to. And I think it's not just because of the pain inflicted on the child, but also like denying that child the experience of choice and the experience of going through it, if that's something that would be spiritually beneficial to them. But by taking that away, I've taken away multiple different things by having this done at that age. So yeah, I don't, it's hard because it's something that God, the Torah, asks for. And so part of me doesn't like to pick this thing to listen to and this thing that's easier to listen to and this thing that's more difficult not to. But I also think that there are other things in the Torah that fall into things that I don't think have caught up to modern times. And that we kind of acknowledge that these things are in there, and also that might not align with our kind of spiritual or moral beliefs today. And I think that wrestling and that questioning is more Jewish than having somebody cut a piece of your dick off as a baby. I think that kind of wrestling with those ideas and even thinking about this stuff is very Jewish to me.
Matt, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us on the Bruchim podcast. Where can people find your work?
I have a website dedicated to my foreskin on, no, I'm kidding. You can find me at soulpublications.co. That's the site that I do a lot of my music stuff, music archival work. It's a pretty cool site. And then Instagram at Soul Publications, at Soul Publications.
Thanks once again.
Thank you for having me.
Next time on the Bruchim podcast.
If you take an approach that only treats gender, that like pays no attention to bodies, you often wind up excluding people who don't fit neatly into one gender category or another. So if you're like, men do this, women do that, then you wind up excluding people who are like, well, I don't know whether I am a man or a woman. Or if someone converts as a woman and then realizes that they're a man or starts, people's genders, they can have new revelations about them. They can come to new understandings of them. And then retroactively, are they like, well, now I'm a man, but I didn't convert as a man. Do I need to reconvert? And like, that's a whole mess. And then on the flip side, if you only look at sex, if you say we're not worrying about the social aspect of it at all, we're just like looking at bodies, there are a lot of different kinds of human bodies. There are a lot of different ways that human bodies can be, even when it comes to genitals. And so then you wind up with this question of like, okay, we have this like model of like the normative penis, but like if someone is sort of like that, but not entirely like that, then what do we do with them? And now suddenly if someone wants to convert, we have to like ask all of these complicated questions about like, I need to know the exact size of your genitals. And like, I'm going to be real, that seems bad.
Thank you for listening to the Bruchim podcast. If you like what you've heard, please go on over to our website, bruchim.online. That's BRUCHIM.online, and consider supporting our organization. We're a 501c3, so all donations are tax deductible. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, feel free to email us at info@bruchim.online. Lehitraot.